The massive chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador John Collins walked to the center podium. 200 alien species watched him from their elevated seats, arranged in perfect rings that stretched up toward the distant dome ceiling. After serving as Earth's representative for 15 years, Collins knew every crack in the marble-like floor beneath his feet. "Distinguished members of the Council," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "For the 7th time in 3 decades, I stand before you with humanity's petition for equal voting rights." The Arcturian representative, Zex Toral, didn't even try to hide his boredom. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of dismissal in his culture. Near him, the Zentari delegation whispered among themselves, their translucent skin glowing with faint amusement. "Ambassador Collins," said High Counselor Dreve of the Drull Confederation, "we have reviewed Earth's application with great care. While we acknowledge your species' contributions to certain technological fields, the Council remains unconvinced that humans have reached the necessary developmental stage for full voting privileges." Collins had expected this response. It was almost word-for-word identical to the rejection they'd received 5 years ago. "May I ask what specific developmental benchmarks we have failed to meet?" Collins asked, knowing the answer would be vague. The Vespian representative buzzed her wings in irritation. "Your species still engages in internal conflicts. Your planetary ecosystem remains damaged. Your lifespans are barely a tenth of the Council average." These were the same excuses they always used, despite the fact that humans had ended all major conflicts 30 years ago, had restored 60% of Earth's damaged ecosystems, and had developed medical technologies that doubled human lifespans. "I see," Collins said, maintaining his diplomatic composure. "And yet the Proxians were granted full membership last cycle, despite their ongoing civil war." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Everyone knew the Proxians had been admitted only because their rare minerals were needed by the Elorian shipyards. High Counselor Dreve's neck frill expanded, a sign of annoyance. "The circumstances were different. The Council's decision stands." Collins nodded slowly. "Then I must inform this body that I have new instructions from Earth's unified government." This caught their attention. Humans were usually predictable. They would protest, then accept whatever scraps the Council offered. The routine had become almost ceremonial. "Earth has authorized me to present a final position," Collins continued. "We request equal voting rights and representation on all Council committees. If these terms are not met within 30 standard days, Earth will withdraw completely from the Galactic Council and all associated arrangements." The chamber erupted. Some delegates laughed openly, while others shouted questions. The Arcturian representative's skin turned a deep purple, a sign of either rage or hilarity. High Counselor Dreve raised his 4 arms for silence. "Ambassador Collins, surely you cannot be serious. Your world depends on Council trade routes, technology sharing agreements, and security guarantees." Collins smiled for the first time that day. "We have carefully assessed our position, Counselor. The choice is yours." As Collins turned to leave, Ambassador Thrix of the Zentari called out, "Without Council protection, who will defend your colonies when the Krell come raiding?" Collins paused at the exit. "We will manage, Ambassador. The question is, without human maintenance crews, who will keep your atmospheric processors functioning on your 17 outer colonies?" He left the chamber to stunned silence. In his private chamber, Collins contacted Earth immediately. President Linda Mason's face appeared on the secure channel. "It's done," he reported. "Exactly as expected. They refused and then threatened us." The president nodded grimly. "Begin Phase 2. Recall our people quietly, starting with critical infrastructure specialists. Let me know when the first systems begin to fail." "It's a gamble," Collins said. "They could retaliate." "They won't," the president replied. "They don't believe we'll actually leave. By the time they realize we're serious, their systems will already be failing." Collins ended the transmission and began drafting the coded messages that would recall thousands of human engineers, scientists, and technicians scattered across Council space. The Council had 30 days to change their minds, but Collins knew they wouldn't. Their arrogance wouldn't allow it. What the Council didn't know was that humans had been preparing for this moment for years. 25 days had passed since Ambassador Collins delivered Earth's ultimatum to the Galactic Council. The grand halls of the Council station bustled with unusual activity as alien diplomats rushed between meetings, their faces tight with growing concern. Nancy Weber, Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Commerce, sat in her office reviewing the latest reports. Her screen showed a simple progress bar, 78% complete. This represented the percentage of human personnel already quietly withdrawn from Council facilities across the galaxy. A soft chime announced a visitor. The doors slid open to reveal Ambassador Krill of the Vespians, his insect-like form nearly filling the doorway. "Secretary Weber," he buzzed, mandibles clicking with agitation. "I hope I find you well." Nancy smiled politely. "Ambassador Krill, this is unexpected." The Vespian settled awkwardly into a chair designed for human proportions. "I come unofficially. There is concern among certain Council members about Earth's position." "I'm sure there is," Nancy replied, casually tapping a key that paused the evacuation reports on her screen. "Surely you understand that your withdrawal threat is impractical." Krill's compound eyes reflected the office lights. The Council has stood for 2,000 years. Many worlds that left the Council returned within months, their economies in ruins. Nancy folded her hands. Perhaps those worlds didn't plan properly. Krill's antennae twitched. "The High Council has authorized me to offer a compromise. Earth will receive a non-voting seat on the Technology Committee." Nancy almost laughed. After decades of humans developing and maintaining Council technology, they were offering a non-voting seat. "That's less than we have now, Ambassador." "It is symbolic of future progress," Krill insisted. "In perhaps another 50 years, full membership could be considered." Nancy stood up. "I'll relay your offer to the President, but I wouldn't be optimistic." After Krill left, Nancy sent a simple message to all department heads. Acceleration authorized. Across Council space, hundreds of human technicians suddenly requested emergency leave for family reasons. Human-operated ships departed from Council stations with minimal notice. On 17 key worlds, human maintenance teams failed to show up for scheduled work. On the Zentari homeworld, Junior Aide Lox approached Counselor Thraz with visible hesitation. "Speak, Lox," Thraz commanded, his translucent skin pulsing with impatience. "The central communication hub is experiencing failures, High One," Lox said. "The automated systems for the Eastern Hemisphere went offline 3 hours ago." Thraz waved a dismissive limb. "Call the human team. They always fix these issues." "I tried, High One. All 7 human technicians requested emergency leave yesterday. Their replacements never arrived." Thraz's skin darkened with anger. "Find someone else. Our engineers say the system uses proprietary human components. They're struggling to understand the architecture." For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed Thraz's face. "This is concerning. Contact other worlds." "Is this happening elsewhere?" Reports flooded in over the next hours. On the Arcturian mining colonies, life support systems were showing intermittent failures. 3 Drell science stations reported navigation systems generating dangerous calculation errors. A Vespian agricultural world discovered their crop management systems had suddenly locked them out. On the final day before the deadline, Ambassador Collins and his entire staff arrived at the Council chamber in formal attire. The room was packed. Not a single representative was absent. High Counselor Dreve spoke first. "Ambassador Collins, the Council has reviewed Earth's petition and offers the following: associate membership on 3 committees and a review of full membership in 10 standard years." Collins approached the central podium one last time. "Distinguished representatives, I thank you for your offer. However, Earth's terms were clear and final. As the deadline has now passed without our conditions being met, I hereby formally withdraw Earth from the Galactic Council. He removed his ambassador's medallion and placed it on the podium. Throughout the chamber, every human aide, translator and assistant did the same, leaving their stations. As Collins turned to leave, High Counselor Dreve called out, "This is madness. You'll return within weeks." Collins paused at the doorway. "I don't think so, Counselor." He gestured to the flickering lights overhead. The first visible sign of failing systems. "Good luck." The human delegation boarded the EA's determination. As they pulled away from the council station, they could see maintenance alerts already flashing across its massive hull. The exodus had begun. The countdown to chaos was ticking. 1 week after the human delegation departed, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. The massive chamber, usually bright with floating holographic displays and status indicators, was dimly lit. Only emergency power systems remained fully functional. "This is unacceptable," shouted Counselor Zextoral of the Arcturians. His normally blue skin had faded to a pale gray, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Half our fleet is stranded in space. The navigation systems are generating dangerous calculation errors." High Counselor Dreve raised his 4 arms for silence, but the chamber remained in chaos. Representatives from dozens of worlds were all trying to speak at once. "Order. We must have order." Dreve's voice boomed through the emergency speakers. The room gradually quieted. "The situation is serious but manageable," Dreve said, though his neck frill betrayed his anxiety. "We have assembled our best engineers to examine the failing systems." The Zentari representative stood. "My world's entire Eastern Hemisphere lost communication 3 days ago. Millions of citizens cannot reach emergency services. Our engineers say the system architecture is puzzling." "Puzzling," repeated Counselor Krill of the Vespians. "The human influence has corrupted our most basic systems. My species' agricultural colonies report crop management failures. We face potential food shortages within months." A junior Drell aide approached Dreve and whispered in his ear. The High Counselor's eyes widened slightly. "I have just been informed," Dreve announced, "that we have located Alan Pierce, the human who designed our primary communication network. He has agreed to speak with us." The chamber's main screen flickered to life. A human man with gray hair and a beard appeared. He sat in what looked like a simple Earth office, with green plants visible in the background. "Mr. Pierce," Dreve began, "the Council demands your immediate assistance with the communication system failures." Pierce smiled slightly. "Hello, Counselor Dreve. I'm retired now, spending time with my grandchildren. This is no time for human games." Zextoral shouted, "Your system is failing. You built it. You must fix it." Pierce nodded calmly. "I did build it, and I designed it to run perfectly for decades, with proper maintenance from trained human technicians. We will pay triple your previous contract," Dreve offered. "This isn't about money," Pierce replied. "Earth's government has made our position clear. We are no longer part of the Council. Our technology goes with us." "This is blackmail," Krill buzzed angrily. Pierce shook his head. "No, just consequences. For decades, you used our innovation while denying us equal standing. You assumed you could access human creativity without respecting humans." He leaned forward. "You were wrong." The screen went dark as Pierce ended the transmission. Silence fell over the chamber until a small representative from one of the minor worlds stood up. "Can we not simply copy the human designs? Surely our engineers can understand their primitive technology." The chief Arcturian scientist stepped forward. "We've tried. Their systems contain elements we cannot replicate, components that seem to operate on principles we don't fully understand. Impossible." Zextoral slammed his fist down. "Humans are barely space-capable. They've only had faster-than-light travel for 70 years. The scientist's skin rippled with embarrassment. Yet they built systems we now cannot maintain. On the edges of Council space, The situation was quickly deteriorating. The Arcturian mining fleet, stranded by navigation failures, sent desperate messages requesting rescue. 3 habitat domes on Centauri colony worlds reported critical failures in their atmospheric processors. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Linda Mason met with her cabinet in the Unified Government headquarters in Geneva. "How are they responding?" she asked Ambassador Collins. "Exactly as predicted," he replied. "Anger, denial, and now the beginning of fear. They've sent 17 official requests for technical assistance in the past 3 days. And our answer remains the same," the president said firmly. Defense Secretary Paul Johnson looked concerned. "They might resort to force, Madam President, take our engineers hostage." "They won't," said Nancy Weber, studying the latest reports. "Their military vessels use human-designed targeting systems. Reports show they're experiencing unexplained malfunctions during routine exercises." President Mason smiled slightly. "We built their house of cards. Now they're watching it fall. The question is, how long until they're ready to negotiate on our terms?" "Not long," Collins said. "The first food shortages begin next week." 3 weeks after the human withdrawal, the Galactic Council sent a high-level diplomatic team to Earth. Their ship, the Pride of Arcturus, was the most impressive vessel in the Council fleet. Its sleek hull gleamed in Earth orbit, a deliberate show of power designed to intimidate. The Council delegation included 5 senior diplomats, 1 from each of the dominant species. They expected to be received at Earth's grandest government building. Instead, they were directed to a small conference room in Geneva, where Ambassador Leila Martinez waited alone. "Welcome to Earth," she said as they entered. "Please, be seated." Grand Emissary Vex of the Arcturians remained standing, his ceremonial robes glittering with rare gems. "We expected your president to greet us." "This is an insult." Martinez smiled politely. "President Mason is addressing food distribution in Africa today. I have full authority to speak on Earth's behalf." The delegation exchanged glances, but finally sat down. "Let us be direct," said Emissary Draz of the Centauri. "This situation cannot continue. The Council is prepared to offer Earth provisional membership with limited voting rights on 2 committees. Martinez opened a folder on the table. "That's less than what Ambassador Collins requested before our withdrawal." "You must understand your position," Vex said, leaning forward. "Without Council protection, your colonies are vulnerable. Already the Krell have been sighted near your outer settlements." "We're aware of the Krell movements," Martinez replied calmly. "Our defense systems are fully operational." "But your economy must be suffering without access to Council markets," insisted the Vespian representative. Martinez slid 5 data tablets across the table, 1 to each delegate. "These reports show our current trade agreements with non-Council worlds. As you can see, our exports have actually increased by 7%. The diplomats scrolled through the data with increasing alarm. Earth had established direct trade with dozens of independent worlds, bypassing Council tariffs entirely. "This is deeply concerning," said the Drull representative. "These agreements violate Council trade protocols." "We're no longer bound by Council protocols," Martinez reminded them. "Now, if that's all, I have other appointments." Vex's skin darkened with anger. "You're making a terrible mistake. The Council has stood for thousands of years. Humans think in terms of decades. We think in terms of centuries. We can wait you out." "I don't believe you can," Martinez said as she stood. "Your people are already protesting food shortages. How long before they demand action?" After the delegation departed, Martinez contacted President Mason. "It went exactly as expected," she reported. "They're still offering less than what we asked for initially." "They'll have to do better," Mason replied. "Reports show their economies are contracting rapidly. The Drell colonies are particularly hard hit." On the Drell homeworld, crowds gathered outside government buildings. The normally peaceful species had never experienced food shortages before. Their leaders were panicking. In a secret meeting, the Drell High Command authorized a desperate measure. A stealth ship was dispatched to the human colony on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Its mission: capture key human engineers and force them to repair critical systems. The ship approached Europa's surface silently, its advanced cloaking technology making it invisible to normal sensors. The Drell commandos prepared to land near the main research facility. Suddenly, warning lights flashed throughout the ship. Every system shut down simultaneously. The vessel drifted helplessly in space. On Europa's surface, Security Chief George Miller watched the disabled Drell ship on his monitor. He opened a communication channel. "Drell vessel, this is Europa Security. Your systems have been remotely disabled. Did you really think we wouldn't build backdoors into technology we shared with the Council?" In the Council's central chamber, news of the failed mission spread quickly. It was a humiliating diplomatic incident that couldn't be hidden. High Counselor Dree faced the angry representatives. "We must consider more substantial concessions to the humans," he admitted reluctantly. From the back of the chamber, a junior representative from a minor world spoke up. "Perhaps we should simply meet their original demands. Equal voting rights seem a small price for stability." His suggestion was met with hisses of disapproval from the senior members, but for the first time, many delegates nodded in agreement. The balance of power was shifting. 6 weeks after Earth's withdrawal, representatives from 3 non-council species arrived at the United Earth headquarters in Geneva. The Rigelians, Tausetians, and Proteans had all been denied full council membership despite centuries of application. President Linda Mason welcomed them personally in the Grand Hall. Unlike the council's ornate chambers, Earth preferred simple, practical meeting spaces with large windows overlooking natural landscapes. "We welcome our friends from the stars," Mason said, extending her hands in the traditional greeting of each species. "Earth is honored by your presence." The Rigelian ambassador, a tall being with iridescent scales, spoke first. "For too long, we have existed on the margins of galactic politics. The Council treated us as second-class citizens, useful only for our resources. Just as they treated humans," noted Chief Diplomat Greg Foster, who sat at the President's right hand. "Precisely," agreed the Tausetian representative, whose 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "We have watched your bold move with great interest." By the end of the day, they had signed the founding document of the Free Systems Coalition. Unlike the Council's complex hierarchy, the Coalition guaranteed equal representation for all member species, regardless of their technological development or military strength. Captain Frank Nelson stood on the bridge of the EA's Defender, Earth's flagship. A small fleet of human vessels had gathered at the edge of what was formerly Council space. They were escorting the first official Coalition trade convoy. "Captain, Council vessels approaching," reported his tactical officer. 5 Arcturian cruisers moving to intercept. Nelson nodded calmly. "Maintain course. Activate defensive systems only." The Arcturian vessels moved to form a blockade. Their commander's face appeared on the main screen. "Human vessels, this is Commander Zelv of the Arcturian Defense Force. You are attempting to enter Council space without authorization. Return to your territory immediately." Nelson smiled slightly. "Commander, we are on a peaceful trade mission to the Rigelian colonies. We have no intention of entering Council space." "The Rigelian system falls under Council protection," Zell insisted, his skin flushing dark blue with anger. "Not anymore," Nelson replied. "The Rigelians have joined the Free Systems Coalition. Please check with your superiors before taking any hostile action." The Arcturian commander's face disappeared from the screen. Minutes later, the Arcturian vessels began powering up their weapon systems. "They're targeting us, sir," the tactical officer reported. "Hold position," Nelson ordered. "Wait for it." The Arcturian ships fired, but nothing happened. Their weapon systems hummed and then fell silent. Confused communications chatter filled the radio bands. Nelson opened a channel. "Having technical difficulties, Commander. Perhaps you forgot that Chief Engineer Samantha Green designed your targeting systems 3 years ago. Back on Earth, Samantha Green sat in a control room surrounded by screens showing various council systems. A team of engineers worked at stations around her. "The Arcturians just tried to use their weapons against our ships," she announced. "The fail-safes worked perfectly." President Mason nodded with satisfaction. "How many other systems have similar protections?" "All of them," Green replied. "Anything humans designed in the last decade has a built-in fail-safe that prevents it from being used against us. It was originally a security measure in case of Council civil war, but it's proving quite useful now." In the council chambers, chaos erupted as news of the failed military action spread. "This is outrageous," shouted the Arcturian representative. "The humans have sabotaged our defense systems." "We didn't sabotage anything," replied Dr. William Carter, the only human still working with the council as a neutral medical observer. "We simply built technology that cannot be used against its creators. A sensible precaution, as recent events have proven." The Vespian representative buzzed angrily. "What else have they compromised?" "A better question," said Carter, "might be, what haven't we?" As the coalition trade fleet safely reached the Rigelian colonies, 3 more species formally requested membership. The news spread across the galaxy. A new power had emerged, one that offered true equality instead of the Council's rigid hierarchy. And it had all started when humans simply walked away. 2 months after Earth's departure, the Galactic Council held its most contentious session in centuries. The once orderly chamber had devolved into factions, with representatives shouting across the floor at each other. The elegant circular seating arrangement, designed to show unity, now highlighted their divisions. "The Arcturians are to blame," declared the Vespian High Speaker, wings buzzing with agitation. "You drove the humans away with your constant belittling of their achievements." The Arcturian delegate, Zex Toral, rose to his feet. "The Vespians were no different. You voted against human membership 7 times. High Councillor Dreve struggled to maintain order. His species, the Drell, had been hit hardest by the human departure. 15 Drell colony worlds now faced critical life support failures. "This blame serves no purpose," Dreve said, his voice amplified through the chamber. "We must find solutions." A junior aide rushed to Dreve's side and whispered urgently in his ear. The High Councillor's neck frill expanded in alarm. "I have just received word that the Minori system has withdrawn from the Council," Dreve announced. The Minori were a minor species, but they controlled important shipping lanes. "To join the human coalition, no doubt," muttered Zex Toral. "Yes," confirmed Dreve. "They are the 7th species to leave this week." The chamber erupted again. The council was fracturing before their eyes. On the Arcturian homeworld, Governor Vex of the southern continent faced an angry crowd outside his residence. The normally reserved Arcturians had never engaged in public protest before. "The atmospheric processors are failing," shouted one citizen, her skin pale with fear. "My children can't breathe properly." Vexets raised his hands for calm. "Our engineers are working on the problem." "For how long?" demanded another. "It's been 7 weeks. The human technicians fixed issues in hours." "We do not need humans," Vex insisted, though he knew this was a lie. "The atmospheric processors have been designed and maintained by humans for decades. Without them, Arcturian engineers were struggling to understand the most basic functions." Similar scenes played out across Council space. On Zentari colony worlds, communication systems failed completely. Vespian agricultural domes reported crop failures. Drell research stations went dark as power systems shut down. In a private emergency session, the Council's inner committee met in secret. "We must face reality," said Dreve gravely. "Our civilization depends on human technology and expertise. Perhaps we could capture their colony worlds," suggested a military advisor. "Force them to cooperate." "Impossible," replied the Elorian fleet commander. "Our ship's targeting systems fail when directed at human vessels. Even if we could land troops, what then? Force engineers to fix systems they designed to fail without them. They would sabotage our efforts." For the first time in Council history, The 5 dominant species faced a problem they could not solve through force or manipulation. Meanwhile, Dr. William Carter addressed a gathering of medical professionals from across the galaxy. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, he had made breakthroughs in treating diseases that affected multiple species. Today, I'm pleased to announce a new treatment for Xentari cellular degradation, he said to excited murmurs. Early tests show a 94% success rate. A Xentari doctor rose from her seat. Will this be available to Council Worlds? Carter smiled kindly. I'm afraid not. Coalition policy restricts sharing advanced medical treatments with non-members. However, any world that joins the coalition will have immediate access. News of the treatment spread quickly. On the Xentari homeworld, cellular degradation affected 1 in 6 citizens. Their government faced intense pressure to access the new treatment. The Arcturian economy, once the strongest in the Council, began to collapse. 3 of their largest colony worlds became uninhabitable as atmospheric processors failed completely. Thousands of citizens were evacuated to already crowded central planets. In the Council chamber, a vote was called. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Council voted unanimously on a single issue: to send Supreme Envoy Xylix to Earth with full authority to negotiate new terms. As the vote concluded, a junior representative asked the question on everyone's mind: what if the humans refuse? High Counselor Dreef had no answer. Supreme Envoy Xylix arrived in Earth orbit aboard the Council's most impressive diplomatic vessel. Unlike the previous delegation, which had come with thinly veiled threats, Xylix came alone. His ship displayed no weapons, only the ancient symbols of peace recognized across the galaxy. Xylix was from a species so old they had helped found the Council thousands of years ago. His kind rarely left their homeworld, and never for something as trivial as diplomacy. His presence showed just how desperate the Council had become. President Karen Davis agreed to meet, but not on Earth. She selected the neutral vessel Concordia, a medical ship that served all species without political affiliation. The ship orbited halfway between Earth and the Council's nearest outpost. The human delegation arrived first. President Davis brought only 3 people with her: Ambassador John Collins, Secretary Nancy Weber, and Chief Engineer Samantha Green. Remember, Davis told her team as they waited, we've come too far to accept minor concessions, equal representation or nothing. Xylix entered the conference room alone. He moved slowly, his ancient body supported by a simple walking stick. His skin had the pale blue tint of his species, and his 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the humans. President Davis, he said, his voice surprisingly strong. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Davis nodded respectfully. Supreme Envoy Xylix, your presence honors us. Xylix settled into a specially designed chair. I will not waste time with empty words. The Council was wrong to deny humans equal standing. We underestimated not only your technological contributions, but your resolve. The human team exchanged surprised glances. They had expected more resistance. And now, Davis asked, I am authorized to offer Earth full membership with equal voting rights on all committees. Xylix said, the Council recognizes your right to representation. Collins leaned forward. Those were our original terms. The situation has changed significantly since then. Xylix's eyes narrowed slightly. What does Earth want? President Davis slid a data tablet across the table. These are our terms. We will not rejoin the existing Council structure. Instead, we propose a complete reorganization, the interstellar cooperative. All species receive equal representation, regardless of their history or technological development. Xylix studied the document carefully. This would dissolve the Council as it has existed for thousands of years. Yes, Davis confirmed. The old power structure failed. It's time for something new. Many of the senior Council members will resist, Xylix warned. Secretary Weber smiled. They're already facing resource shortages, system failures, and public unrest. How long can they resist? As they discussed details, An urgent message interrupted them. A Centauri military vessel had launched an unauthorized attack on a human research station near Alpha Centauri. This wasn't sanctioned by the Council, Xylix insisted, clearly alarmed. Chief Engineer Green checked her portable terminal. The attack has already failed. Their systems shut down as soon as they targeted our station. Xylix lowered his head. Not all Council members accept the changing reality. The Centauri have been particularly resistant. This proves our point, Collins said firmly. The current system can't control its own members. We need fundamental change. Back on the Centauri homeworld, General Krax faced the consequences of his failed attack. His superiors had discovered his secret operation and were furious. You have endangered our entire species, the Centauri High Leader hissed. The humans control our most critical systems. They could shut down our life support at any moment in retaliation. We cannot surrender to primitive beings, Krax insisted. Yet these primitive beings defeated your attack without firing a shot, the High Leader pointed out. They showed mercy by not retaliating. Do not test their patience again. On the Concordia, negotiations continued for 3 days. By the end, Supreme Envoy Xylix had agreed to most of Earth's terms, with minor adjustments to ease the transition. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Xylix asked President Davis a final question. Was this your plan all along? To force a complete restructuring of galactic governance? Davis smiled slightly. We simply wanted equal treatment. When that was denied, we decided to create a system where no species would face such discrimination again. Xylix nodded slowly. A noble goal. I hope we prove worthy of this second chance. News of the agreement spread quickly across both Council and Coalition worlds. Some celebrated, others worried, but all recognized that the galaxy would never be the same. 1 year after humans walked away from the Galactic Council, representatives from over 300 species gathered on neutral ground. The chosen location was significant, a newly constructed space station orbiting a previously uninhabited world. Neither human nor Council technology had been used in its construction. Instead, it represented a true collaboration between diverse species. Ambassador Ryan Peters led the human delegation into the vast central chamber. Unlike the hierarchical design of the old Council, this room was arranged in a perfect circle with identical seats for all representatives. No species sat higher than another. It feels different, Peters said quietly to Nancy Weber as they took their places. That's the point, she replied with a smile. Supreme Envoy Xylix called the gathering to order. Despite his advanced age, he had worked tirelessly over the past months to bring this moment to reality. Today marks a new beginning, Xylix announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. The dissolution of the Galactic Council and the formation of the interstellar cooperative. Not all faces in the chamber showed joy. The former dominant species, particularly the Arcturians and Centauri, struggled to hide their resentment. They had resisted until the very end, only conceding when their own populations demanded change. As our first official act, Xylix continued, we acknowledge the injustices of the past. For too long, certain species were denied equal standing despite their contributions. Each of the former council leaders stepped forward to deliver a formal statement of recognition. Zex Toril of the Arcturians appeared physically pained as he spoke. The Arcturian worlds acknowledge our role in perpetuating an unjust system, he said stiffly. We treated humans and other species as lesser despite evidence to the contrary. For this, we express regret. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but it was more than anyone had expected from the proud Arcturians. After all 5 former council leaders had spoken, Ambassador Peters approached the central podium. A hush fell over the chamber. Humanity accepts these acknowledgments, Peters said, but more importantly, we look forward. The past cannot be changed, but the future remains ours to shape together. He lifted a simple crystal cylinder containing the new charter. This document establishes that all sentient species, regardless of their history, technology, or military power, hold equal voice in matters affecting our shared galaxy. One by one, representatives came forward to place their genetic signature on the charter. Humans were neither first nor last, simply one species among many. As the signing proceeded, the station's systems monitored the restoration of technology across formerly Council worlds. Human engineers had already begun helping with critical repairs, teaching local specialists rather than simply fixing problems themselves. Dr. William Carter watched with satisfaction as medical knowledge was freely shared with worlds that had joined the cooperative. On the viewing screens, children of various species played together in newly established cultural exchange programs. Far from the ceremony, on a small farming colony, an elderly human teacher named Betty Johnson sat with alien children in a classroom. On the wall hung a simple chart showing the history of the galaxy. "Can you tell us the story again?" asked a young Zentari child. "About how humans changed everything." Betty smiled. It wasn't complicated, really. Sometimes the most powerful action is simply to walk away from a bad situation rather than fighting to change it from within. "But weren't humans afraid?" asked another child. "The council was so powerful." "We were nervous," Betty admitted, "but we had prepared carefully. And we understood something the council didn't. That true power comes from cooperation and sharing knowledge, not hoarding it." As the final signature was placed on the charter, the new interstellar cooperative officially began. Ambassador Peters joined hands with representatives from dozens of species in the center of the chamber, forming an unbroken circle. "This is just the beginning," he said, looking around at the diverse faces. "Imagine what we can accomplish together." In that moment, the old hierarchies that had dominated galactic politics for thousands of years truly ended, all because humans had the courage to simply walk away.